Hello, I'm Hubert, and welcome to Decodable Demos, where we demonstrate all things related to streaming. And since it's Halloween is coming up, this is my character. I'm the Mad Hatter, and I make crazy decodable pipelines and flows. So I hope you enjoy this next demo. We're going to set up a S3 bucket with a Lambda notification so that whenever you write data into S3, we could automatically read it and put it into Kinesis for processing in real-time streams in Decodable. Alright, let's get started. First, we're going to create a bucket. We're going to start completely from scratch. I'm going to always put my name in front of it so I can find my own stuff. And we will do a Lambda I'll just call it Lambda S3 and Lambda S3 Lambda. Okay, we're west. And everything else should be fine. Okay, let's look for our bucket. There it is, S3 Lambda. We're going to create a folder, or we'll call this one events. All right, there we are. The first thing we need to do is create a function. So let's do that. There's a couple ways to do this, but we're going to do it one way. Then we'll just kind of just walk through and I'll point you out the other places where you can, the other way to do this as well. So here we have 4 Lambda functions already. If you just go to Lambda, you can get it here from just going to Lambda under Services. I have a Lambda. I already have one running here just to test it out. But let's start from scratch here because I haven't done this in over a week, and I don't know if I remember. So let's make mistakes on purpose. Let's see. S3 Lambda, and we want to for Decodable, so that we can read it in Decodable or consume it in Decodable. Let's use Python here, and we want. Let's create a new role using existing profile. Create a new role. Let's do a create a new role here. Actually, let's use an existing role, and we're going to do that in here. So let's create a new role just in case we need it in here. Next. Next, we're not going to give it any policies. We're just going to use this as a Hubert S3 Lambda decodable role. Okay, so roles are where principals here are allowed to assume these roles, and you give these roles permissions. So at some point, we're going to give this role a permission to read from our S3 bucket and execute a write into Kinesis, all within here. Okay, so we'll come back to this one and then create this role for now. See, Hubert missing field principal cannot be empty. So well, let's come back to this and we'll do that one later. Okay, and then we'll create a new role here instead. Alright, so this is our Lambda function. We already have one done. So if you go to our handy dandy Decodable GitHub repository under examples, you'll see lots of examples for everything in the world almost. Let's go into S3 events, and there should be a Lambda Python file in here for you to grab. So just click the raw button here and copy all and paste it into the function, into the Lambda function. Okay, so let's walk through this code really quickly just so that we have a good understanding. Let's look at it in here so that we can have line numbers. Here we go. We're going to pull in a couple of things. We actually don't need this library, but we do need Bodo, which is our way to get to both S3 and Kinesis. This will give us the clients to be able to read and write to AWS services, read from S3, write to Kinesis. Okay, since data is going to be in basic encoded bytes in Kinesis, we need a way to do that encoding using this library. And requests, we also don't need this as well. This is a relic from something else that I was doing. Okay, so you can clean this up yourself, but the more important stuff are right here. Okay, this is the function. This is what will get called when your Lambda function gets invoked, and your events are going to exist in this parameter here. You can also get more information in the context, but we're not going to do that right now. We don't actually need it. Okay. So when events come in, there'll be a records parameter, and it'll be an array of records, so that now you could iterate through these records, and this will be your property or your variable called records here. From there, you can ask more information. So you're probably wondering what this event looks like. So I have a sample of it in here. Let me create another tab. Here it is. So the event that gets created from S3 is this. So you see the records context. It is an array. You'll have all these parameters to read from. This is just an example. What we are concerned about is this. We want to go into the S3 context. We want to go into the bucket so that we get the bucket name. Okay. We also want the key. This is the key, or basically the file name and the path to the object that you want to read. Okay, so if you go back into the code, you'll see that we're pulling out that information, the bucket and the key. We are parsing the key using the URL lib so that we can grab just the key part of it, which is, I believe, just the this thing right here. Right? Let's take a look at that again. So like it's unquoting anything. It's just basically decoding the string value of the URL. So when it gets parsed, there's no escape characters that we're consuming. Okay. So now we have the bucket and the key. We have also an S3 client up here. Okay. And we're going to use the bucket and the key to read an object or that object in S3, and the response is this object right here. Inside that response, there'll be a parameter called body, which is a function which you can call a read function into. So when you read that, you get a body. That's your data. And in our case, we are reading records of JSON strings. So you have to know how the data is, in this case, you need to know how the data is, separated in the record, right? Because you're parsing that, or in a file, you're parsing that file. You normally probably don't want to read the entire file and send the entire file as one giant message into Kinesis. Kinesis does have limits into message sizes and so forth. The data we're looking at is going to look like, I'll go back to an older folder that I had here. Will look like this. So if you go to my customers directory here in my other bucket and ask to open this, it will look like this. It'll be multiple records of JSON messages delineated by new lines. So that's what we're doing with the Lambda function. In here, we are splitting it up by new line, so that gives us every record, every message, and we're omitting the last line, this little last part right here, because that last line is an empty string. So if you go back to here, over here, there is a line down here that you don't. There's a new line right here. So if there is a new line there, this is going to kind of cause an error. So you don't want to consume that. So I guess you just want to omit the last line. Of course, you got to check for all this. Make sure that you're not missing any data. If you do, you'll probably well, somebody might get mad at you if you lose some data. Okay, so that's what this is doing, and for every record in that file, we are going to send it to Kinesis. This is the stream name that we're sending it to. But I want to create a new stream, so let's do that first. Let's go to Kinesis, and we're going to create a new stream, and we're going to call it S3 Lambda Decodable. Okay, and create that stream. And that should come up pretty soon. So we're going to rename, let's copy this value. We're going back to our code. We're going to change this stream name to the one that we're going to use. Okay, this is the record. Okay, we are not, first we are decoding it right here, because this is bytes coming from S3, and that turns it into a string. And then we split up that string by new lines, and we omit the last line. So now we have a JSON record that is a string. Okay, and we're just going to set that record into the data parameter and the put record. Okay, so far we have two functions that we need permissions for: get object on S3 and put record for Kinesis. All right. And then once we do that, we just return success. All right. This is a new function. So what we want to do is create a test. Okay. We want to configure a test event, and there are many types of events. We want specifically the S3 create event. Okay. So let's call that S3 create event for Lambda. Lambda. Okay. And we're going to search for one here. S3 put event. What that creates is a sample event for you to use. Okay. And notice it looks exactly like the one that we were looking at in the README for this in our decodable examples page. This is exact format. If you want to actually read a file, you need to make these values real. So what we want to do is, I think what would be a good idea is to point it into an existing bucket, which is this one. I have one called Hubert Snowpipe, and we're going to put that in here. Even though this is not the bucket we're going to be reading from, we don't care at this moment. We just want to be able to read from a bucket. Actually, you know what? We may have to change our permission a little bit around. Let me do this. Let's go back to our buckets. Let's do this for real, Hubert. And then we are using S3 Lambda events. So let's upload a file that we want to test with. And we're going to copy the contents of another bucket. Okay, and we're going to use our Hubert Snowpipe one. So let's go back to here, open this guy. We're going to copy just a couple of lines here, close it, and then let's just create a temporary file. And let's see, in our what was desktop, the S3 Lambda test.json. Well, it's not really JSON, but let's just call it well, let's just leave it as JSON. So we're going to insert those records in here, escape, save. Now we're going to go back to our S3, the one that we care about, the S3 Lambda, the one that has no data in it yet. And we're going to add files. Go to our desktop, S3 Lambda JSON, and upload that. So we're going to use this as a way to test our Lambda function. And by doing that, we have Hubert. So this is our key. This is the file, the name of our file, or Lambda, and it's in a directory called events, I think. So if you go back to here, it was uploaded in this bucket in this directory called Lambda events. So you want to put events/S3 Lambda test JSON into this key. You want to make sure that this says Hubert, your bucket name. So I'm going to copy that and put that in here. Alright, so now this test event, okay, this is what we'll use to test our Lambda function. It'll get sent as the payload to the Lambda function in our Python code. Our Python code is looking for sorry, we want this as the wrong ARN. It needs to go in here. So our Python code is going to look for each record, and in each record the S3 bucket, name of that bucket, and then the object and the key of that object. Okay, let's save this. The rest of this we don't need. If you need it, you can test it out, but right now all we need to do is read data from the bucket and send it to a Kinesis stream. Let's save that. Okay, great. You gotta deploy it. So every time you change something in your code, you gotta test it out. This is going to fail if we run it immediately because we don't have the permissions to write to a Kinesis stream yet. We'll be able to read it, but we won't be able to write data yet. In fact, let me just comment this out first, and we'll just print the record here, so that we could just test the read part of it and not the write of the Lambda function. So let's test this. There's a error, no module name requests. I think we don't even need that, so let's take that out. Deploy, test. Access denied. We're trying to gain access to this bucket. So we don't have permissions for this function yet. Okay, so let's go into configuration. Under permissions, and we want to modify this role right here. Okay, this role, let's see here. Let's click on the right spot. Let's make it open in another tab. Now we have notice that this changed into the IAM view. We have role. This is our role. This is the role that we are going to assume when we run this Lambda function. Okay, and right now it has the ability to run a Lambda function. Okay, and that's it. We need to add a few things to here. We need to give it permission to read from S3. So create, let's create a policy. What I want is an S3 thing here. We want read capabilities list, most likely. Actually, if you look at our code, let's just test this out. We only want from S3 get object. So let's actually do that. We want get object. Sorry, I'm not very good at clicking. Get object. Click. Okay, we don't need to write to S3, you just need to be able to get an object. So let's review this policy. Now, we actually need not just that, we need to be able to put into Kinesis. So let's put this back in. We want to put record in S3. So let's look for that. Or I'm sorry, in Kinesis. Kinesis. Oh, this is an S3 service. So let's finish this. When selected, okay. Choose a resource, and we want specific resource. Let's just click any, and we'll look at the JSON that this creates. Let's change this to the bucket that we want. This is the S3 Lambda. And then events. I always like the JSON view better, if you know what the JSON looks like. So let's save that. Actually, I'm going to save this for myself and put it in my documentation over here. Okay, let's review this policy. Let's name this policy Hubert Lambda Kinesis write, or this is put. Actually, this is S3 read. Okay. All right, now we're able to read, hopefully, from S3. So let's comment. Let's test that out. Deploy, test. And it looks like we're able to read that data. There's our data. It's CDC data, so this will be fun. Let's see what that looks like when we read it in Decodable. Success, we responded with success. So now let's uncomment this and see if we can get it into S3. But we need obviously S3 policies here. So let's add another policy. And let's choose a service called Kinesis. And we want to write. So we want actually put record or records. Right now we're just doing put record, but maybe we want put records in the future. So let's put that one in there. And that should be it. So let's review this policy. Let's look at the JSON view. Oops. Review policy. Let's put this one. And let's count. Look at the JSON. Stream. We want a specific stream. We want this stream. Copy that. And here, save changes. Let's look at the JSON. Alright. Let's see if that works. Review policy. Let's name it Hubert Lambda put record to Kinesis. Create that policy. So now we have the ability to run a Lambda function, write data into Kinesis, and read data from an S3 bucket. Okay, so we just gave them all this permission. This is the same role that this Lambda function, if you go back to the configuration and permissions, it's that same role. Okay, so presumably we have all the permissions we need to be able to run this Lambda function and write that data into S3. We won't be able to read S3 yet, so we're just going to use Decodable to actually do that ourselves. So let's deploy this. We just want to know if this errors. Okay. In fact, I want to put this print record down here. And then I'm just going to do something like this. Sent record. I'm going to print out every record we sent if Kinesis doesn't fail. Okay, let's save that, deploy, test it. So it looks like it didn't error. It looks like it's sending data to Kinesis. So let's configure Decodable to see if that is the case. Let's create a new connection. Create Kinesis. Our stream name was this. Yeah, US West 2. We're going to use a different ARN. We're going to follow Decodable's documentation on Kinesis. So here's our connector, library, Kinesis information, and just like every other thing we need to do in AWS, we need to be able to allow Decodable to read from our AWS Kinesis stream. In order to do that, we need to do the same thing that we did kind of with the Lambda function, but we need a role to assume. Okay, so let's look at this. Hubert role. Let's create a new one. And we always want to do this because that allows us to work with JSON, and then we can just paste our JSON that we find in here. So let's copy that. Go back into here, select all, paste. Okay, this is Decodable's AWS ARN principal account. We now need to provide our external ID, which is basically our Decodable account name. In this case, it's Decodable demo or demos. We can find that value up in here. Let me duplicate this view. Okay, you can find that information up in the top right hand corner, click this drop down, copy paste this value into here. So it's not plural, it's singular. Just copy paste it just to be safe. And now this gives permission to Decodable to read from our, well, to have Decodable assume this role. And this role we're going to add permissions to be able to read from our Kinesis stream. Okay, so we have now that we've created that role, we need to assign a permission to it. We can create one. We can look for an existing one. Let's see if we can find one in here. We don't. Let's create a policy to allow us to read from Kinesis. So Kinesis. In this case, we want to read. If you go back to our documentation here, there's another JSON structure here you could use. This is the permissions policy, so you can just copy that, go into the JSON view, and paste that. So we're just allowing me to do everything here. Okay. Next, add a tag that's optional. Review this. Give it a name. Hubert Kinesis read. Create that policy. Now that we've created that policy, we created it just opened up the new tab. We need to go back to the original tab. Refresh this view. You should see the permissions you just created. You want to click that, so that you're adding those permissions to this role that Decodable will assume. Okay. Next, we want to give a name to this role. So Hubert, let's see, S3 Lambda Kinesis. That sounds good enough to me. Create this role. And that's it. Search for that. There's the role. We want to capture this ARN. Okay. Let's go to back to our Decodable configuration, the one we were already adding. So this is our stream we want to read from, the region, and the role. We already know that's going to be JSON. Next. We want to put this somewhere, so let's create that. It is a complex Debezium format. I want to create, I just want to clone one that's already got this available. I don't want to rewrite that. I think this has it. So this is what it looks like, before and after operation and timestamp and all of this. So I'm going to go up here, clone this, next, and then I'm going to say I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say, what should I say? S3 Lambda Kinesis source. Okay, create stream. So now that we have that stream, we're going to use this stream in our source. There it is there. Next, there's our schema. Next, we're going to name that the same thing. It's also named source, but let's give it, let's just name it the same way, it's fine. Or connection. There we go. Create connection. Alright, fingers crossed, we're going to start it. Alright, so this is not going to do anything yet, because we haven't configured the S3 Lambda bucket to notify the, any events to the Lambda function. Okay, so there's two ways to do this. One way is this, and I'll show you the other way, a different way. So here's the another in a second. Here's the function that we just created. We want to add a trigger. So click Add Trigger, and the source is going to be S3. So click here, and the bucket name we want is I think it was this one. All objects. So we probably just want this one. Let's see. Let's put them all in there. We want events as the subdirectory. We want JSON as the suffix. And they make you acknowledge this because people have made mistakes. Okay, so there is our notification. So this is going to notify this Lambda function to do some stuff. So, and with that event. So that event is going to look like this test that we created right here, this data. So whenever we drop or upload or something or application writes a new record, JSON record into the events directory, one of these events will occur. If there's multiple records or multiple files, you'll get multiple entries into this array. Okay, and then it'll, like we did, invoke our Lambda function. We will iterate through all the records and then send each one to Kinesis, and then we'll read it. We'll consume that data from Decodable. So let's look at Decodable. This is already running. No data is coming through yet because we had just set up the notification, and so it didn't capture any of the old notifications when we uploaded that data. Okay, let me quickly show you the other way of creating a notification on an S3 bucket. So if you go to the S3 bucket directly, you want to go to the root of your bucket. There's your properties. Okay, if you scroll down, there's another section down here called notifications. Notice that there's already one in there. When we created that trigger in the Lambda view up here, right here, see there's an S3, it automatically created it in here. So you could do actually the same thing in here. You can create an event, give it a name, the directory, the prefix. You could click post or all of them. And then down here it's already selected for Lambda function, and then you want to choose your Lambda function down here, and we have one here called S3 Decodable. Okay, so we already have this already done. They'll cancel that. If you go down here and click here and edit, you'll see that it already knows the function to call. Okay, so those are the two ways to set up a notification on an S3 bucket. Okay, so now everything should be set up. If we write something else to this directory, it should pick it up, and we should see data coming in. So this is the connection, the source connection to the Kinesis. Click here. We want to see data come into here. So let's go to our bucket and add more data. Objects, events. We're going to upload data, add files. Let's see if it complains if we added this again. Upload. Succeeded. Let's go here. Refresh. Apparently it overwrote it. Did that trigger anything here? It did. So this is the contents of that directory, or that file in that directory, and now you can further process this with with a decodable pipeline, which is SQL. You could run a preview on it and start manipulating this data for downstream processing. You can populate a Postgres table, send it to Snowflake. You can send it to look for events that are happening in real time with any of the other sources we have. So if you go over here, you have MySQL. You can send it to a real-time OLAP database. Lots to do with this information. Okay, that's it. We have completed this. We could write to S3, get notified using a Lambda function. That function reads the contents of that file, writes it into Kinesis. We then create a decodable connection that reads from that Kinesis stream and then writes it into a decodable stream, which we could further down process or write it to another sink or transform it and join it with other data. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you, if you have any questions about this, join our Slack channel at Decodable. It's called Decodable Community. You can go to Decodable and go all the way to the bottom and join our community down here. Also, try this yourself. It's absolutely free. Why not? It's pretty fun. And start experimenting. Reach out to us if you have any questions, and good luck. Thank you.